Hey guys, this will be a short video, but this is a common question I see about midterm rentals, where people tend to think, for some reason, that there's a high risk of squatters and, having to deal with evictions with midterm rentals. So let me break it down in this video. If this is the first time you're watching one of my videos, my name is Alan Dwan. I own a property management company for midterm rentals in Los Angeles. This is what I do all day long. Well, not all day long, every day, but not the whole day. But let me show you. So there's a midterm rental Facebook group. There's several that are very active, and I saw this post. Hope you guys can see it here. And I see this often, which is why I wanted to make this quick video, kind of like debunk this myth. So I'm not gonna read the whole thing, but essentially, if I kind of focus on, here's this question, right? They're like, how are people even doing midterm rentals? Um, they're in Washington State, 30 days or less is short term, at least da 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 da. The concern here, if I kind of like read between the lines, is if I do something that's more than 30 days, then they are a tenant and they're protected by tenant law, especially if you're in a market like I'm sure if they're in like near Seattle, this is true, or I'm in Los Angeles or a lot of other big markets or st certain states that have tenant-friendly laws. It's like, how do I even do midterm rental? Because they might squat and now they have tenancy and now I gotta evict them. Again, this is not a one-off. This is just an example. I actually commented on this one, and my comment, my first line was just they do it the same way a long-term rental owner does it, right? The risk of someone squatting or not paying rent and you have to evict them is no different. Well, actually, I'll argue it's different. It's no worse than renting out a long-term rental. And clearly, many people rent out long-term rentals. They're not going to leave their property vacant because they're afraid of a squatter, right? So, you know, not the point of this, not the topic of this video, but screening, insurance, all these things you could do to make sure you have the right tenant. Um, but I think the messages like this, uh, the underpinning idea I see often for people who are new to MTRs, whether they're coming from the STR space or the long-term rental space, is that there's somehow a increased risk of squatters with a midterm rental. I want to make that very clear here. From my experience, we are managing about 40 midterm rentals right now in Los Angeles. I've been in this furnished rental business for 8 years, but focused on midterm rentals since right after the pandemic. So that's like 5 years now, 4 or 5 years. So I don't know how many hundreds of stays we've had. Um, in my experience, midterm rental tenants, or guests we call them, are the highest quality compared to short term and long term. In other words, I believe, in my professional opinion, that the risk of a squatter or having to evict someone is actually lower with a midterm rental than a long-term rental. So if you are a property owner with a long-term rental and you're afraid of that risk or you've dealt with it, one of the ways to mitigate the risk of a squatter is actually to do a midterm rental. And the main reason, if you think about it, the difference is you furnish the place and they're staying for a shorter amount of time, right? What about that inherently makes it a higher chance of squatting? I would say nothing. And in fact, there's reasons why it's a lower chance. So um, when I think of squatters, there's two categories. Uh, the smaller percentage of them probably are this first category, the intentional squatter, right? We all know there's people who intentionally they know these rules and they're trying to take advantage of them. And those are the people that we all hate, right? Scum. Just I won't go down that path. And then most likely, and I don't have data on this, it's just my thoughts. Uh, Most of the people who end up squatting or having to be evicted is not that they rented a property with that as their intentional plan. It's that they fell behind on their payments, they lost their job, something else in life changed, and they weren't able to pay, right? And that's when the screening really filters that out, right? When it comes to the credit, your background checks, checking their credit, income verification, like what kind of job do they have? Is their job seem stable? Stuff like that. Now, when you take that to midterm rentals, um, the reason, if I had to choose one singular reason why it's a lower chance of having a squatter or an eviction risk, is because we don't rent our midterm rentals to someone who's looking for a home. Right? We don't rent for someone who's going to stay at a property indefinitely. We rent to people, to guests who have a defined end date to their stay. And that's because of the very specific reason they're renting a midterm rental. Um, their home is being repaired or renovated. When that when their home their project's done, they want to go back to their home, their local, right? They are here for work, whether it's like they're a entrepreneur, whether they're an employee and their company sent them. When their work is done, the company's gonna stop paying for the housing, obviously, and then the actual people staying in the home want to go back home to their families. So that in and of itself reduces the chance of squatters. There's not a situation where they're going to stay there and not pay. They don't want to stay. They want to go home. And again, when we screen for midterm rental tenants, we specifically are avoiding those who are just looking for their next place to live. It doesn't make any sense to me why someone would rent a midterm rental and pay such a high rent for that unless they couldn't qualify for long-term rental, right? If someone comes and asks to rent one of our MTRs for 1 month, I moved out of my apartment and I'm looking for a next place to live. Really? For how long? Um, yeah. So just want to kind of bust this myth that MTRs are somehow riskier when it comes to squatters and eviction. So hopefully we made that clear and we won't see any of this online anymore. And I've solved this problem for everyone. Just joking, of course. Um, if you again on my channel, we talk about all things MTRs. If you want to learn about more about MTRs, check out in the description. There's a link to our free school community where we do a weekly live call, and there's a very active community and a message board about all things MTRs. Let me know if I could help you, and I'll make more content that people ask for.